Hi, everyone. This is Too Young to Be Old podcast with me, your host, Diane Gilman. Each week, my guests and I will share insights, advice, and more than a few laughs to empower and inspire women over the age of 50 who really need to embrace the aging process. We want to encourage you to pursue your passions and dreams, no matter what decade you're living in. Too Young to Be Old podcast is intended to educate, empower, and foster connection with our community. Please note that this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or care. So, with that said, let's settle in, get comfortable, and let's get started. Well, hi, everybody. We're here for our weekly podcast, Too Young to Grow Old. And I have a very dear friend, but also a very successful podcaster, my friend Will Sullivan, who is a kindness advocate and into his third full season of fabulous weekly podcasts about kindness. So, giving you just a teeny bit of background about Will, for 20 years, Will was responsible for the whole front end public experience of the Metropolitan Museum. Oh, yeah, that museum in New York. And when COVID hit, and there was a lot of conflict over wear a mask, don't wear a mask, come to work, don't come to work, Will decided to leave the corporate world and become a kindness advocate. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but you seem to have designed a life for yourself now, Will, that is so much more natural. And I need to ask you a question. I also left the corporate world, but that was in December of 2022. It's been 2 years for you now, right? Going on 3.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 2 years.
Why do you think that the corporate world feels meanness is how you must motivate your employees and keep them in line? I'd love to hear your conclusion on this.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh,
I'm super
please.
excited and I can't wait to talk about this topic. So to go back a little bit, I really understood during the pandemic and during the lockdowns when my sole job, my sole reason for working at that particular moment was to take care of other human beings. And we had to make sure we would open the museum. We would be reopening the city because remember those dark days in 2020, no one knew what was happening.
Yeah,
So I had spent a year of my life solely looking after the people that I was privileged to manage.
right.
So when all of that started to happen, I started to realize I want more of that. So I had always been the leader. I'd always been the leader who took care of people, taking care of the guests, right? There was 7 million people a year prior to COVID, 7 million people a year that visited the Met. And in my tenure, that was 150 million guests. So I was the guy amongst the teams who took care of those 150 million people.
Yeah.
So COVID made me realize, hey, what did you do? Were you this great retailer? Were you great hospitality expert? No, no, no. I was always about the people that I served. And
Okay,
that's what made
so
me change my life.
in a way, that is so parallel to what I did, which was rather than a designer putting out their ego of you buy what I want you to buy,
Right,
I served my customer and
right,
said, you can buy what you've needed and asked for so many years that always hits a deaf ear in the fashion industry. But I am
right.
asking you, why do you think, because you worked for a much bigger corporation than my business model, why do you think meanness is always the critical factor in corporate overview of how you handle your employees?
So I would reframe it a little bit differently. And what I've come to learn in my experience is that those who become the leaders, those who float to the top, those with the big positions, I don't necessarily believe, and now there's always the exceptions, but I don't necessarily believe it comes from a place of meanness. I think what happens is those who achieve the titles, the position, and have the power are often those who've never actually taken care of people.
Ah,
So, as someone who grew up through the ranks and always on the front line in my career, right? Your retailing career, you were designing, you were making things for the public to buy. I was the guy out there in the public with the teams who were selling the stuff that you made,
yeah.
right? And promoting it and saying, "Hey, Diane, I don't think this is going to work." And you would be the kind of person like, "What do you mean, Will?" And there was that collaboration, right?
Uh-huh.
You could be able to say, the customer's not buying this, the customer doesn't want this, and we could collaborate. I believe what's happened recently in corporate, in companies, is those that are leading organizations have never been in our shoes. And when you are able to actually put yourself in the shoes of your customer and in the place of those who are helping your customer, those who are leading your customer, it changes everything. And that's what I have spent the last 2 years talking about, trying to do, consulting about. And that's why I changed the word meanness. It comes across as very mean and often inhumane, but not necessarily because that's what the
Well,
executives are trying to do.
in the situation I was in where I sold my company and I sold my name, but I went on working for X amount of years due to a contract. Meanness was
Right.
meanness was intentional. Meanness was
Which is
a sense
unfortunate.
of control,
Right.
and it is control. However, the backlash is whoever
Right.
is in power is not always right, but must be perceived and followed as always right
Right.
because you don't dare speak up. And so speaking of meanness, I ask, why is social media the progenitor and the purveyor of so much meanness? And I'll just give you an example. So the other day I'm getting my hair done, and who comes, no surprise, surprise, and who comes next? Martha Stewart. She gets her hair done by my guy, Troy, John Barrett's salon. And so I always say hi to Martha. She says hi to me. I say, great going. My God, the cover of Sports Illustrated. I bring it up in a short video, and the blowback I get is, wow, that's fine for Martha Stewart. She's had 25,000 facelifts and
Hmm.
8,000 Photoshop filters. And excuse me, the woman is 81 years old and she's on
Right.
the cover of Sports Illustrated in a bathing suit. And so I said in my response, kind of give her a break. But I just wonder, is it social media that brings out the lack of kindness and meanness you would know as a kindness advocate?
Right.
Or is is that just the playing field? I don't understand where all this anger comes from. Like, you're not being fair. You use Photoshop. Damn right. I'm 81 years old. I'm using Photoshop, okay? Maybe a little
This
too
is,
much, but
hey, listen, this is how I see it. Everyone becomes brave with their phone in their hand, a keyboard. Right. Think about it.
ah,
I think about this often, and I'm human, right? You're in the cafeteria of where you've worked. You're with people not inside a boardroom or inside a meeting room.
yeah.
You're speaking the truth, right? You're speaking the truth in the cafeteria with your colleagues, right? Yeah. Oh, isn't this ridiculous? But in front of the leader, are you telling the leader this is ridiculous? No. So what social media for me has, when I see it, and I can't believe that I've actually built a social media profile like you, Diane, it just blows me away. but people become brave when they don't have to say something to your face, right? People will say mean things to you. No, maybe not everyone, but people will are inclined to be meaner or to not be as kind as they could be because they're hiding behind a device.
But they also seem so angry to me. Like the women that responded about Martha Stewart were so angry. And then I start to think to myself, in an age of airbrush perfection and AI about to wash over us like a tsunami, how do you reconcile the authentic you and the perfected AI, artificial intelligence, and Photoshop filtered, perfected you? Because we made a conscious decision, as I'm sure you did, when you
Mhm.
started your podcast and your presence on the every kind of media there is. We said, no, we're not going to use any filters at all. Not on the podcast, not in videos on Instagram or TikTok
Right.
or Facebook, nothing. It's going to be the real me. And you know what? I'm thinking now, this was such a disadvantage. Like, to be perfectly honest with you, I saw some of her outtakes where she was in her evening gown for the premiere of the cover of Sports Illustrated, and they hadn't photoshopped them yet. And
So it was the real deal.
they were
Yeah, it was
very
the real
different.
deal.
And to be very honest with you, I was like, ooh, look, she has wrinkles on her chest. So your brain and your eyes get so attuned to what's perfect that what I'm thinking is when you meet the real deal, you're like, oh, deflated. What is going to happen to us as a human race, especially for those of us in first world countries like America, pardon me, where you've got all these electronic devices, you have got all these ways to perfect and filter and fantasy, and then reality becomes a real letdown, and it becomes a tinderbox of anger and meanness because you can't be that perfect
Right.
in real life.
I see it in this way, right? I think AI, everything that we're experiencing right now with the explosion of technology,
Yeah.
there's no going back.
No
There's no
going
going
back.
back.
All that stuff about, oh, they should just all stop right now. Are
No,
you kidding me?
it's never going back, and we will continue to evolve.
And you know what?
I
I just want to say this before you begin. And the children that are being born today, right now, and forward, they will know nothing but artificial intelligence. They
right.
will know nothing but fantasy and completely perfected images. So,
A,
sorry.
a really quick story, you
Yeah.
just made me think of it. When my nieces and nephews were very young, my dad had a computer in his home office. And the kids asked, "Oh, when you were young, Uncle Will, did you fight with your sister and brother to get on the computer?" And I'm thinking, there was a TV, one TV with with stations, right? They had no idea. They had no idea,
And,
right?
literally, I remember when I was 6 years old, almost seven, we were the third person on our block to get a TV, which only ran for 2 hours a day and had three programs. So for
Exactly.
those of us like me, and I'm in my late 70s, and you're in your late 50s, but still
Exactly.
you're seeing the oncome of a lack
Right.
of realism and actually a lack of demand for realism. Make everything perfect. And
Right.
when you can't be perfect, like teenage girls, they said that there is a suicide rate where you're thinking
Uh-huh.
about suicide because you've been body shamed or hair shamed or face shamed
Right, right.
because what you expect is not what could ever be delivered in the real world. But hey, why live in the real world? As a kindness advocate, what do we do about this?
So this is how I approach it, right? And we can each approach what we have influence over,
Yeah,
right? You've got your world and you've got your communities and you've got your clubs.
which is mostly
I've
fashion, beauty, all
exactly.
things aging
So
women, which is
you're a pioneer, right? You're someone who I am not, and this is where it comes in. You are someone who's not just going to say, well, this is my age, so I'm supposed to do nothing, right? You keep going and you inspire others. And I think each of us in our own way, right? I'm from the world of leading large teams who helped millions of people from around the world. I can't I can't fathom a world where AI can take over the in-house experience. You go to restaurants, we shop in stores. That piece of it, because we're social beings, will never go away. It will change, and we're seeing how it's changing. I don't go into a department store anymore. I haven't been for a very long time, but I shop online. I go to restaurants. But where I look at what's happening in the real realm are, wow, there are all of these people, many of them young enough to be, my children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews. They haven't received any kind of training or connection to what it means to be in the public realm. So I think my circle of influence, right? I can address the AI and the change of technology. There's always going to be a need for the in-person experience, and I believe in the human heart. I believe that the
ah,
leaders of the futures, the leaders of the future will have to be those who lead from heart, common sense, understand who they serve.
that
That's
is
my belief.
that is so brilliant that you say that, and it's so relatable to me because all of my career, I was so afraid of failure that I designed from a distance. I didn't wear the clothing. It was abstractly beautiful to me. I did a lot of the prints, painted them myself and the artistic end of it. And the day at close to 60 that I said, you are a chubby, misshapen, middle-aged woman. You can't wear a jean, but you can design a jean for you. And I did, and I put it on, and I had done it from my heart because I was so heart sick. I'd been this cool, young, rock and roll chick for way too long, and now couldn't, but now could again. The minute I led from my
Mhm.
heart, it was magical. It connected to the universe in a way that was so
Right.
electric and complete. But I wonder today if I was a teenage girl and I'm very pale skin like you, freckles, had red hair, I don't think too many people would have been kind to me. I think I would have been one of those kids where I would be begging my parents for homeschooling because my imagery was not the perfection. And the weirdest thing too, Will, is that whole meanness factor, like Mean Girls,
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily come from beautiful girls. It just
It,
comes from
it comes from
people
human beings.
that
Yeah.
have
Right.
that
Right.
streak in them. And, I think that I've done a lot of kind of freshening up my brain on artificial intelligence. So I'm going to ask you a question. Um, do you think artificial intelligence and the demand and expectation for physical perfection is going to change the definition of love?
That's a really deep question,
I'm a
but
really deep girl.
that really may. I don't know. I think to go to your point, right? There's so many
Yeah,
images. Young people were influenced by social media, movies, films, books.
yeah.
But ultimately, I don't think there's a replacement for what chemistry you can have, right? You and I know each other. We could be in the same room and there's an energy to the two of us, right? There's different energies with different people. I think one of the biggest problems, and I don't know how to solve it, AI will dominate so much,
Yes,
leaving those who don't have our life experience to believe maybe this thing is true, right? This
absolutely.
beautiful love.
Absolutely. I think that also, and I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm looking outside and I can barely see halfway across Central Park with the
I know it's weird today.
wildfire,
Yeah, I know
all
it's
the smoke.
unbelievable.
So let's imagine in a dystopian world that number one, another pandemic comes, which I'm pretty sure it will, having spoken to a
Right.
lot of the medical community, and you're hit with wildfires and global warming, 110-degree days, and you're spending more of your time inside. Where are you spending it? You're spending it next to your computer,
Hmm.
your iPad,
Hmm.
but most importantly, your phone.
Right.
And
Right.
now everything AI, the way the outdoors should look, not with this
Mhm.
horrible gray brown mist because there's fires everywhere because of global warming. How do you reconcile that? I mean, maybe love becomes something where you actually can feel, you teach yourself, you learn how to feel the person's energy across the screen. How maybe you, if I was asked, and we were talking about it before this show began, um what would my avatars be? Because I'm an artistic
Mm.
person. So if I could create my own avatars, then believe me, there'll be a whole other set of artists and art experts that do nothing but that for people. Create your avatars. One would be a super big, luxurious black Persian cat with emerald eyes, a giant tail, and an emerald
I could see it.
collar. And it'd be
I could see it.
swooshing around, and the tail would be in the background. And the other one would be a white iridescent unicorn sprinkled with
Filled
diamonds
with hope.
flashing in the sunlight. So you see, I didn't even choose another human to be. I didn't even choose
Right.
a perfected self. I chose my favorite images, animals, and I would live through them. I isn't that strange? But just thinking about it,
Uh,
we are entering a world where non-reality is going to become as everyday as reality does. And how do you keep the kindness going?
So I was the guy sequestered on the Upper East Side for decades, welcoming people from around the
Yeah.
world. So when I made the decision that I'm not going to do that anymore, leaving the hundreds of people I worked with each day, the thousands of people I collaborated with, and the tens of thousands I welcomed, this self-proclaimed people person, right? This people guy was leaving his people.
Yes.
I then go into this online world, right? And this podcasting world and connecting world, and I have made some really deep connections with people online.
Yep.
Not in a creepy way, but in a real way. And so I'm a believer that the pandemic, at least for me, taught me that you can connect with people and you don't always have to be in the same room. So I see
Absolutely.
the benefits
I
of it.
do too, because when the pandemic started, I had just been back on air for what, 3 months from breast cancer surgery. And suddenly
That's
I woke
right.
up to go to the studio one morning down by where the studio was in Tampa, Florida. And there are these big red letters saying, don't come to the studio. The studio's closed down. People, workers have COVID. was lucky enough to get flown home immediately. And my life
Wow.
for the next couple of years became doing
Right.
Skype shows. So I was in my home. The host came into the studio just to do that particular show with almost no crew. And then the third factor was you were connecting with the audience in a totally new way, and in a way, even a little
Hmm.
bit more personal because you're broadcasting from your own living
Right.
space. And
Right.
to tell you the absolute truth, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. And now when I go
And you
out,
did so well.
yeah, and actually the customer loved it too. They felt more of a connection. And so I think we're going to have to train our brains in that way.
Right.
And then again, for me, it's just all about being an advocate for aging, the way you're an advocate for kindness. And I feel in so
Exactly.
many instances, and I hate to say it, but your old alma mater, the Met, I was there the other day. They are not kind. I have a bad limp right now because of my knee, and it was so
Mm.
disorganized. And not one guard, not one person said, "Do you want a place to sit since you're in line
Mm.
for an hour? Or are you over 75? We'll get you in right away." It was so mean that actually we left. We forfeited our
Wow.
tickets and walked out. And so kindness in the sense of this podcast, which is about too young to be old, rather than too old to be young, it's about how do we create a world for ourselves as we age that is positive and accepting. So I'm going to ask the final question.
Okay.
Who is your avatar? You have all the freedom in the world to create whatever you want. You know me, I'm a big, chubby, fluffy Persian cat with a jeweled collar, or I'm a beautiful, sparkling, iridescent unicorn. Who are you?
I would have to be, other than the big bald guy that usually shows up when I try to
No,
create
no
my
fair,
own,
not fair. You can't be you, but you could be another guy. You could be
I would
Clark
have to
Gable. I
be
don't know.
I would have to be one of the elements. And as you were talking about this, I kept thinking about my purpose on this planet is I'm a conduit, a connector. I love to bring people together. So I think I would have to be a water element, fire, sun, I don't know, something that would be that something beyond me or an individual. It would have to be something that I'm part of something bigger because that's
Wow.
how I choose to use my presence
Wow.
here on earth.
Wow.
So, so that's how
And look
I
at
see
and
it.
look at me. I've been in fashion and all my life, and then it turned visual and fashion with television. And what do I choose? Number one, a big, beautiful cat that everybody's going to want to touch and pet and pamper, and a mythical creature that no one can say anything mean about. Who would say anything mean about a unicorn?
Right.
Nobody.
I'm sure there may be some in the Republican Party that may come up with something, but politics is another show, right,
Yeah,
Diane?
totally and completely. Well, I will leave with I think the aesthetic of kindness is literally timeless. There need to be more human beings on this earth
From the heart.
spreading that kind of happiness like you will. And please, everybody, go to LinkedIn. That's where Will's podcast weekly
Mhm.
generates from. It is a pleasure and an education to listen to your podcast every week.
Thank you, Diane.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes.
And I so appreciate you and all that you're doing. And I'm so excited to
I'm
be a
working
guest here.
at it.
Thank
I'm
you.
enthusiastic about it.
Keep going.
No
This is great.
filters,
Thank you.
no Photoshop. That's
I'm with
me.
you. I'm with
I
you.
love you. Bye. Thank you.
Same here, Diane. Take care.
Bye.
Till next time.
Thank you so much for listening to Too Young to Be Old podcast. The episode may be over, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Diane Gilman, or visit our website, thedianegilman.com. If you like the show, leave us a rating or a review and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And until then, don't forget, age is just a number. Together, we'll prove that we are all too young to be old.